What's going on, my dear friends? Today in this video, let's learn and master the Angular framework's latest version. So let's get started. Alright guys, in this lecture, let's see how to do the previous examples using the new syntax approach. So let's begin. So guys, same as previous, when using the syntax approach, we have to follow the two steps. First, we have to define the switch. After this, we have to define the cases, the same as previous. So first, let's define the switch. So for this, we have a separate syntax. So let's do this. First, we have to add the @ symbol. And the next we have to add the directive, which is switch syntax. So after this, add the simple brackets and the directive scope. So simply open and close curly brackets. So same like other directives. So first the @ symbol followed by the directive name. After that we have to add the brackets and the directive scope. So all the new directive syntax are same like this, right? Alright, so now inside the brackets, we have to define the switch. In our case, switch is this user's role variable. So pass that inside this switch directive brackets. That's it. So guys, successfully we completed our first step. Next, let's move on to the second step, which is defining cases for this switch. So guys, for this also we have a separate cases syntax. So let's add this inside this switch scope, @ symbol, and the directive is case. So after this, parentheses and the method scope. Now inside this parentheses, pass the case. So our first case is that we want to show the admin message when this user role switch set as admin. So set our first case as admin inside this case brackets. So pass this as a string value inside quotes. So next, inside this scope, let's add the message that we want to render inside the browser. So create a p tag and the message is welcome admin. So guys, we successfully completed the second step as well. So now let's see whether this is working or not. Save this. Wait before we move on. Change this user's role value back to admin. So save all and go to the browser. As you guys can see here, we got this welcome admin message, which is coming from this case syntax. So guys, this is also same like the ng switch case directive. The only different here is these syntaxes, right? Alright, so now if you want to show the second case for the member message, how do we define that using this case syntax block? Can you guys guess? Yes, of course. So in the previous ng switch case, we created another switch case in the same ng switch scope, right? So this is also same like that. Just simply create another case block inside this switch block. After this first case, add another case syntax, @ symbol, and the directive is case. So after this brackets and the directive scope. Now the case is, we want to execute this case when user's role set as member. So pass that here as a string value inside quotes. Alright, so next inside this pass the message, create a p tag, and the message is welcome member. That's it. We successfully defined the second case. So save this and go to the browser. As you guys can see here, we still got this admin message. Why is that? Because this value set as admin. So change it to member. Again, save this and go to the browser. As you guys can see here, this time we got the welcome member message, which means second case also working as we expected. Alright guys, before end of this lecture, let's look at the default switch case as well. So in this new syntax, we have a separate syntax for this default switch case. So same like previous, if you want to show a message when the user is not logged in or when our user's role variable value is set as empty string value. So how do we do that? For this, we use the ng switch default directive in the previous approach. So in this syntax also we have a separate syntax for this called default. So let's see this in action. Down here, after the second case block, add this @ symbol and the directive is default. Next, for this we don't need any parentheses because for this default case we no need to pass any condition cases, right? So just simply add the directive scope. So next let's pass the message inside the scope, add the p tag and set the message as please login. That's it. So save this and go to the browser. We got the welcome member message. So why is that? Because this user role set as member. Now change this to an empty string. Save this all and go to the browser. As you guys can see here, this time we got our default message, please login. So this default syntax block also working as we expected. Awesome, right? So guys, this is also same like the previous switch case. First we have to define the switch and after that we have to define the cases. So in any case, if we want to show a default message, then we can use this default syntax block, right? So guys, that's it for this lecture. Hope you guys got the idea. Alright guys, this is the end of the structural directive. So next, let's move on to the attribute directive. Perfect. Alright guys, we successfully completed the Angular structural directive. So now from on this lecture and next few lectures, let's dive into the attribute directives. So under this attribute directive, first let's look at the ng style directive. So guys, I created here an h1 tag and added these text as h1 text welcome admin. So guys, inside the browser, this is loaded with the default styles. Now what I want to do is I want to set this h1 text color green and all uppercase based on a condition. Think we have a boolean variable called is logged in. If this is logged in value set to true, I want to make this h1 text color in green, and also I want to make all the text uppercase. If the boolean value is false, I want to make these red lowercase letters. So how do we do that? For this, we can use this style binding approach, right? So in the data binding section, we learned about this. So let's see this in action. So guys, how do we do this style binding? First thing first, inside these open and close square brackets, as you guys know, we use the square brackets for property binding in Angular, right? So now inside this, the binding is style. After this, we have to pass the CSS property name. So first I want to change the color of the text. So the CSS property is color. Next, we have to define the logic or the condition. For this, pass the variable which is logged in. So pass this inside of double quotes. So after this, question mark. If this return true, set the green color. So pass this inside single quotes. Otherwise, set this color to red. So we define the else part using the colon, right? So don't forget to pass the red color also inside of single quotes. Awesome, we successfully set the first style. Now next I want to add another style, which is I want to set this text to uppercase. So how do we do that? For this again, we have to add another style binding, right? So I copy and paste this previous style binding, change the CSS property. So this time we have to pass the CSS property text transform. So pass that here. So guys, pass this as HTML DOM style properties. So as a single word with the second word first letter capital. In our case, this transform T is capital. So guys, hope you all remember this. We learned about this in detail, right? So next we have to change the values. If this true, I want to set uppercase. So pass that here inside this quote. In the else, pass the lowercase style value. That's it. So save this and go to the browser. As you guys can see here, we got this green uppercase heading text in the browser. So if I change this boolean value to false, now we got this red lowercase letters, which means everything working as we planned. So guys, if we look at this in here, we wrote two style bindings for this single HTML element. For a single style binding, this approach is okay, but for multiple style binding, this is not a good practice. So as a solution for this, Angular has given us the ng style directive. So using this, we can simply write these two style bindings inside of a single ng style. So let's see this in action. So guys, down here again, I'll create another h1 text for this. So you guys clearly see this difference between these two approaches. So h1 tag and set the text as ng style directive. So next let's add the ng style to this. So guys, the condition is same like previous. If this is logged in value set as true, this text must be in green uppercase letters, otherwise red lowercase letters. So how do we do this? Very simple, same like previous. Inside square brackets, pass the directive name ng style. After this, we have to pass the conditions and the styles that we want to apply. So guys, in this ng style, we have to pass the values inside of an object. So simply open and close curly brackets. So inside this, first we have to pass the CSS property. So first I want to set the color. So the CSS property is color. Pass this inside of quotes, right? Next add a semicolon and pass the logic, which is the is logged in variable. So pass that here. Next we have to pass the CSS values. So if this true, question mark, set the green color. So pass this also inside single quotes. After this, if this return false, we define that using the semicolon, right? Add the semicolon, set the color to red. So pass this also inside quotes. That's it. So we successfully defined the first style. Next, let's see how we can add the second style for this. Guys, how do we do that? Do we have to add another ng style to this? Now guys, unlike the style binding, here we can stack multiple styles to this single ng style directive. So let's see this in action. I'll break this into the next line so we can see this clearly. So after the first style, add a comma, and in the next line, simply just add the second style and the condition. So again, the second style property is text transform, pass this inside quotes. So after this condition, which is this is logged in variable, pass this after the colon symbol. So next the values, so question mark, if this true, set the text to uppercase. If this false, set the value to lowercase. That's it. So guys, we are getting this error because in order to work with this ng style directive with this component, we have to import this. So same like the other ng directives like previous, right? So go to the app component ts file and add the directive inside the imports array ng style and select this autocomplete. Alright, so save this and go to the browser. As you guys can see here, we got our second heading text in red color lowercase letters. So why is that? Because this is logged in value now set as false. So change it to true. Save this and go to the browser. Now you guys can see here, this time we got this text in uppercase green color text. So guys, which means this ng style also working as we expected. Alright guys, so the beauty of this ng style is with the single binding, we can bind styles to our HTML element as many as we wanted, unlike the previous style binding. In the style binding approach, for the each and every style bind, we have to write separate style bindings. But with this ng style directive, we can simply write this all inside of one single ng style directive. Awesome, right? Alright guys, so this is how we use the ng style directive in our Angular application. Alright guys, in this lecture, let's see the second attribute directive, which is ng class directive. This is the alternative for class binding. Nothing much here. So let's see this in action. So guys, think rather than binding these two styles one by one, we can create CSS class for this and we can add these two styles inside of that CSS class, right? So something like this. Go to the app component CSS file and let's create a CSS class something login, and inside this add our CSS styles. First one is the color. Set this to green, and next is the text transformation. For this, set the value as uppercase. So let's first see the class binding approach. So then we'll come back to the ng class directive. Alright, so how do we do the class binding? Hope you guys all remember the class binding, right? Alright, so let's do this. Inside the HTML file, let's create another h1 tag for this and set the text to something class binding. Next, let's add the class binding approach to this h1 tag. So inside this h1 tag, open in tags, inside add square brackets. So the binding is class. After this, we have to pass the CSS class name, which is this login. So add this after this class dot login. Next, inside quotes, pass the is logged in variable. So guys, if this is logged in value return true, this will apply this CSS class to this. Otherwise, this will remove this CSS class from this h1 tag. Alright, so save this and go to the browser. We got these green uppercase letters because this is logged in value is now true. So now what I want to do is I want to change this heading to red color lowercase text to when this is logged in value set as false. So how do we do that? For this, first thing first, we need the CSS class. So let's define this. Inside the component CSS file, duplicate this previous entire CSS class and change the class name to something logout. Next, change the color to red, and at last change the text transform to lowercase. That's it. So next, in order to add the second class, we have to use another class binding, right? So I just copy and paste this previous class binding again and change the class name to logout. Next, I want to show this when the is logged in value set as false. So add the not operator here, which is this exclamation mark, right? Next, quickly set this boolean value to false. Save this all and go to the browser. As you guys can see here, now this h1 text are in red and lowercase. So guys, this is how we bind two classes in class binding approach. So next, let's see how do we do this using the ng class directive. So guys, in order to use this ng class directive, we have to first import this to our component. So first, let's add the import statement. So inside the import array, add the ng class and select the autocomplete. Next, inside the component HTML file, and let's create another heading tags for this. Create h1 tags and set the text as ng class directive. Next, let's add the ng class directive to this h1 tags. How do we do that? Very simple, same like the ng style binding. So inside of square brackets, pass the directive ng class. Next, inside quotes, open and close object scope, which is curly brackets. Now inside this, first we have to pass the CSS class name and the condition like object key value pairs. So inside quotes, add the CSS class that we want to add to this text, which is login CSS class, right? So after this colon, and the condition is this variable is logged in. So guys, if this is logged in value return true, this will apply this CSS class to this h1 tag. Alright, so let's look at the second scenario. If this is logged in value set to false, I want to add this logout CSS class to this heading tag. So how do we do this using the ng class directive? So unlike the class binding, for this we don't need to use another ng class directive. So we can simply pass that CSS class also inside this same ng class directive. So after this, add a comma. Next, same like previous, first pass the class, which is logout. So don't forget to pass this inside quotes. So next, pass the condition. This time we need to check the false condition. So let's add the is logged in variable with the not operator or with the exclamation mark. That's it. So guys, simply this will apply this logout CSS class to this heading tag if this variable return false boolean value, right? That's it. Save this and go to the browser. As you guys can see here, now we got this ng class text in red lowercase. Why is that? Because now this variable value set as false. So now let's change this to true. Save this all and go to the browser. Now as you guys can see here, this time this text changed to green uppercase letters. So which means this ng class directive applied the CSS class according to our condition. So guys, this is the simple use case of ng class directive. So when we working on the project, you guys will understand these concepts with more in-depth examples. Alright, so guys, that's it for this lecture. Let's move on to the next lecture.
Alright, now you guys have an idea about Angular directive. In the first lecture of this section, if you can remember, I said that we have 4 main directive types in Angular. The first one is component directive, which is the Angular component. The second one is structural directive. Third one is attribute directive. And the last one is custom directive. So in this section, let's look at what is structural and attribute directive. The first, what are the structural directives? Structural directives are responsible for the HTML layout. This structural directive shape or reshape the DOM's structure, typically by adding, removing or manipulating the DOM elements. Structural directives are easy to recognize with the leading asterisk symbol. So we learned several directives in this section. So we have few directives with the leading asterisk or the star symbol, which are ng-for, ng-if and the ng-switch cases. So these are the structural directives. Let's look at some examples. I have created just a few examples for this. The first one, the ng-if directive. So what is happening here? With this ng-if directive, we're showing this div when this statement is true. So this will add this div to the DOM when this is true. If this is not true, this will remove this div and this will add this ng template inside the DOM. So with this ng-if directive, we are manipulating the DOM's structure by adding and removing elements to the DOM. So this is why we called this ng-if directive as a structural directive. If you look at the second directive, ng-for, this also adds this list element to the DOM by fetching an array. If there is a data inside the array, this will add list elements to the DOM. If there is no data, this will remove the list element from the DOM. The switch case also the same. If this condition is true, this will add this to the DOM. If the statement is false, this will remove this from the DOM. So this is what we called structural directive. So here is the lesson. With this structural directive, we can manipulate the DOM by adding and removing DOM elements dynamically. So for a structural directive, we use this leading asterisk symbol. So we can easily identify a structural directive with this leading asterisk. So let's look at the attribute directive. So what is attribute directive? An attribute directive changes the appearance or behavior of a DOM element. We can name ngStyle and ngClass directives as attribute directives. You guys already knew, with these attributes, we applied styles to an element conditionally. If the statement is true, this will add this style to the DOM. If the statement is false, this will remove the styles from the DOM. So simply, this is what we can do with attribute directives. We use these attribute directives as like property binding inside of a square brackets. We are not adding any leading asterisks because this is not a structural directive. So here is the lesson. With the structural directive, we can manipulate the DOM by adding and removing elements to the DOM's structure. But with the attribute directive, we can only change the appearance of a DOM element. We cannot manipulate the DOM using these attribute directives. So hope you guys got the idea.